Hey, what's up everybody? It's Christian here with Reaper Disc, and today we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite approach discs of all time, the Westside Discs Harp. The Harp is an approach disc coming in with flight numbers of 4303, being fairly overstable and forehand friendly. The Harp is one of the earliest true approach discs to be released in the sport and has since become one of the gold standards of that style disc. Players such as Ricky Wysocki have been known for years of absolutely dicing up approaches with the harp and just, making things that aren't easy look easy. The harp is a fairly deep dish approach disc with a higher shoulder and flat to almost puddle top, depending on the plastic, kind of top of the disc there. That makes it extremely comfortable for both forehand and backhand shots. And honestly, this has, like I said, been one of the gold standards for forehand approach disc, regardless of manufacturer. The harp has always been one of the best out there, and for good reason. I used to bag the harp for a very long time and was one of the most relied upon discs that stayed in my bag. A lot of times I've found myself putting the harp back in the bag, coming in and out, things like that. I always know that no matter what happens, I can always rely on the harp to be that extremely consistent and reliable approach disc. So let's get into how it flies and just why I like it so much. When thrown on a hyzer, it had probably one of the just most buttery, uniform hyzer flights that you can possibly ask for out of an approach disc. It doesn't change angle whatsoever and just gets out of the hand, flies extremely smooth, has what seems to be the perfect amount of glide, and pushing forward as it fades just has a uniform arc to the flight. There's nothing inconsistent about this thing, there's no changes halfway through the flight. The moment you release it, it just stays in that perfect arc all the way until it hits the ground. It comes out of hand extremely smooth and just, honestly, just came down right where I wanted it to. When thrown flat, the harp flies pretty straight for, a good portion of the flight before having a nice consistent fade. It's not incredibly overstable, and it doesn't have an insanely high resistance to high-speed turn, meaning that you can throw this thing flat and it's going to fly straight until it really starts slowing down. It's going to be really nice whenever you're faced with, some tighter gaps to hit in the woods or things like that you need to focus on throwing something hard and flat without worrying about turning over, but also being able to fly straight for a majority of the flight. When thrown on anhyzer, this disc will hold an anhyzer surprisingly well. Because it is relatively overstable in nature, instead of throwing it up on Annie and it just coming straight back down on anhyzer and turning into a cut roller or landing on edge or things like that, it naturally wants to fight out of it a little bit. Meaning that instead of just going up and coming straight back down on the same angle, it's going to start panning from left to right. Now, this did have a little bit of left to right, solid movement there. It got all the way back from the peak of the flight, all the way back to about even with where the release point was before it flattened back out and kind of stalled and then faded at the end. This disc would be insanely useful if you're trying to flex around like a tree or a second tree or multiple trees, things like that, a big bush, whatever you're trying to get around, before kind of fading back out at the end. Or if you can get your angles right and you need something to get up in the air and then move from left to right for a good ways, you can get this up in the air and count on it to get up on anhyzer and then flatten out and pan for what seems like ever before landing flat. If you're good with your angles, you can execute that shot. That is just an absolute work of art to see, and this disc is perfect for it. Now, when thrown full power, the harp did flip up the flat out of the shallow hyzer that I put it on and flew dead straight. Pretty similar to the flat release, it flew straight for about 75% of the flight before just having a very, very mild finish. I would almost consider that a straight finish, but it did have just a little bit of bite at the very, very end, meaning that, it still does have that overstable tendency to want to finish at the end of the flight instead of just finishing straight. Again, that's really, really useful. This thing isn't insanely overstable, so you can really, tinker with your angles and your power and things like that to get a multitude of different flights out of this disc. This is, like I said, probably one of, if not my absolute favorite approach disc that I've ever thrown in my career. There's a reason that this spent so long in my bag. There's a reason that this was the go-to approach disc of choice for players like Ricky Wysocki, who really put that style shot on the map. Prior to Rick, not a lot of people were really utilizing the touch forehand approach shot in their game as much, and when he came out doing it with the harp, he turned an entire generation of players onto that style of play, and a lot of them turned to Ricky's weapon of choice, the harp, to try to get the same outcome. And a lot of people never looked back. The harp is still to this day one of the most popular approach discs on the market, and for good reason. I would suggest the harp and recommend it to any player wanting to learn how to throw a touchy forehand approach shot or just needing a short range driver that they can really lean on with a lot of power and trust that it's still going to be consistent and not get too squirrely on them. I think the harp has a place in any player of any skill level's bag. No matter kind of what, I think you can find a use for this disc. And I think that if the harp is in your bag, it's going to come out a lot more than you ever would anticipate. It's a fantastic disc and one that I believe every player could use. If you want a harp for yourself, hop over to reaperdisc.com by clicking the link in the description of this video, and you can go over and find your next harp for your bag. Follow us on social media at ReaperDisc. That way you guys can keep up with any of our new releases, restocks, or exclusive drops. Subscribe to the channel, and if you want to keep up to date with all of our new content, ring that notification bell. It doesn't cost you anything at all, but you're the first to know anytime we put out new content. Again, I'm Christian with ReaperDisc, and I'll see you guys in the next video.